Hi, I'm Dianne Jeans. I'm the founder of Australia's CEO Challenge, now known as Challenge DV. We set it up in the late 1990s. I've been on the board, chair of the board for 20 years and continuing now to be a director from afar. In my day job, I've been a long-term public servant and now civil servant in the UK. In the 1980s, I became a public servant, and during the 1980s, mid-1980s, I was invited to join the first task force in Victoria to examine the issue of domestic violence in Victoria and help write the first report on that. That started my lifelong passion for dealing with the issue of domestic violence as an issue which, if women cannot feel safe in their own home and they cannot reach their full potential and participate fully in life if the people they love are being violent towards them. So over the years, the issue of domestic violence has sometimes coincided with my work in Queensland Police in the 1990s. Domestic violence was one of the issues we worked on, but more often than not, it's one of those things I feel very passionate about and work with outside my formal paid work. And setting up CEO Challenge DV has been an important part of my commitment to dealing with the issue of domestic violence. I'm also a member of Zonta International, a global organisation focused on women and girls and empowering and their advocacy on their behalf. They have a long-standing campaign on violence against women, which is one reason I'm part of that organisation. So Challenge DV, CEO Challenge, I keep calling it that, sorry, but it came about in the 1990s. I was chair of the Lord Mayor's Women's Advisory Committee in Brisbane. Jim Soorley was the Lord Mayor at the time, and he asked his advisory committee to look at the issue of domestic violence. As the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, he was quite clear that if one woman wasn't safe in their own home, then Brisbane was not a safe city. So the committee looked around for how could we contribute to the conversation around domestic violence rather than duplicating anything. What could we do that would add to the agenda in the community? And we came across a program for the United States called CEO Challenge, established by Jim Hardiman, and we had Jim Hardiman come to Brisbane and talk to us and talk to many community and business leaders about what that program could do and how we could pick it up in Australia and pick up the issue of how workplaces and businesses contribute to the issue of solving domestic violence in our community. I'll probably use the name CEO Challenge and Challenge DV interchangeably during this interview. It's been known as Australia's CEO Challenge or CEO Challenge for over 20 years, and recently we've rebranded as Challenge DV. That's a very important part of changing our message and changing our brand and our approach. But 20 years of habits are sometimes hard to break. So CEO Challenge was set up in the late 1990s, particularly to work on workplaces and to work on a partnership basis between businesses and refuges and those who are responding to domestic violence. We set up on the principle that partnership was the main way to do this, and to bring the conversation into the workplace, we needed to also link into the refuges and the work that they were doing. It really gave an outlet for those refuges to be recognised in their workplaces for the work that they do, often in silence and often in secrecy, given the nature of the work they do, supporting women fleeing from domestic violence. But the recognition that they got as part of this program was a huge bonus, I suppose unexpected bonus almost, from the program we set up to actually bring the work that they do into the light. To establish CEO Challenge, what we did was brought together a number of women's and business groups who would be interested in this issue and talked about how we could address it. We brought together people like Lynette Palmer from Women's Network Australia. We brought together people from the trade union movement. We brought a range of women's business organisations and sat down together and said, how could we work together to actually take forward this issue as a business issue, not as a community issue or something in secrecy. It was lots of support from those women in the room, and CEO Challenge was born out of those conversations, with strong support from many of those organisations in helping us get established, alongside, of course, the support from the Lord Mayor Jim Soorley and the Brisbane City Council. So the ideas for this program sort of generated in the 1990s and bubbled up to the surface, and we started a program just reaching out, connecting with businesses and connecting through partnerships with refuges, and it became a way of having conversations in businesses. Sometimes it's easier to say, could you help somebody else with your business, rather than asking them to talk about domestic violence, and by default the domestic violence conversation opened up in those workplaces. So that was in the 1990s. In 2002, we became an incorporated organisation with the support of Minter Ellison, and Minter Ellison has been our foundational partner ever since. So it's with great joy today we look around and we still work with Minter Ellison. We work out of their offices. They are great supporters. Their staff are fantastic. And of course, Rob Reid, who we'll hear about more in Darkness to Daylight, was my deputy chair for many years. I chaired CEO Challenge DV through to 2017 when I moved to the UK and now continue on the board of directors. As an organisation starting up, we had no staff, we had very little funding and often used basically just volunteers, ourselves and people around us who were prepared to get involved and talk to businesses and talk to refuges to make things work. Over time, we've got small grants and small amounts of money and donations. We're able to have a part-time worker, for initially one part-time worker and then a full-time worker, and it was very exciting. And now we have a much larger complementary of staff and who are able to really take our programs out. We've developed those training programs. Initially, it was just talks by refuge leaders or by ourselves in workplaces over a cup of tea, and from there it's gone to become a fully fledged training program with really credible training around domestic violence and the issues that surround it. Another thing our organisation used to do to both raise money and awareness was to invite CEOs or senior leaders of organisations participate in a race to raise awareness and funding for our organisation. We've had some fantastic leaders step forward to be part of that. Jude Monroe at Brisbane City Council, she had bus backs on every Brisbane bus talking about domestic violence. Paul Scurrow then at Queensland Rail had similar advertising through the Queensland Rail network. We've had people, Deb Wilson from On Talent, had handbag sales. And also Neil Scales from Department of Transport and Main Roads has been a great supporter and a racer many times over the years. So I'd also like to acknowledge the role of the local ICT industry in Queensland in supporting us through an annual ICT trivia, Government Against ICT Industry, which raised lots of awareness around the issue in the ICT sector, but also raised a lot of money for CEO Challenge. I'd particularly like to acknowledge the efforts and the support from Scott Reid and Andrew Fisher in that industry. Why workplaces is a really good question. When we looked for where we could make the best impact in domestic violence prevention, we found the issue of workplaces was one where very commonly the issue of domestic violence wasn't talked about. And in fact, trying to engage CEOs in that conversation was a very difficult thing because mostly it's invisible to senior leaders in an organisation. But we know domestic violence has a big impact on workplaces and on workplace culture and on workplace costs. So we did, I think, one of the first studies on the cost of domestic violence to the business sector, and we were able to demonstrate the size and the scale of the impact of domestic violence in workplaces, whether it's through lost productivity, loss of people being able to come to work, with loss of good employees leaving and having to retrain new employees. So I think the statistics say that 1 in 2 victim survivors of domestic violence talk about the fact that it impacts on their work. They talk about the fact that it impacts their productivity. 1 in 4 say they have trouble getting out to bed to come to work in the mornings, sometimes when there's domestic violence. And there's also research that show that perpetrators of domestic violence often use workplace resources and workplace time to actually perpetrate some of that violence. So it is an important issue for workplaces to pay attention to. And they can be part of the solution. So I think it's acknowledging that people spend a significant part of their day every day in workplaces, and by taking the issue there, talking about it there, it's a safe place to talk about the issue. It helps deal with a business issue and it helps deal with a broader community issue, and workplaces can be part of the solution to this issue. Recent research from Monash University confirms this. 1 in 2 victim survivors said it negatively affects their career progression and opportunities. 2 in 3 victim survivors said it impacted on the ability to concentrate at work. 1 in 4 victim survivors said it impacted on the ability to turn up to time for work. Globally, studies have found that 78% of people who use domestic violence often do so during work hours using workplace resources. Research shows that total business and productivity cost of domestic violence was estimated at $1.9 billion. I've certainly seen a big change in the way the community and the world deals with the issue of domestic violence. In the 1980s, it was a very hidden issue, not just for the community, but when it wasn't talked about, it was a shameful thing to talk about, and the police response was really less than satisfactory, and there was no legislation that actually dealt with it. In the 1990s, when we decided to talk about this in workplaces, it was really interesting to watch CEOs go, oh, not an issue in my workplace, not happening at my house. And I don't need to talk about this. And so finding ways to get businesses to talk about and acknowledge their role in domestic violence and their potential role in sorting the issue and the impact on them has been a long, hard road. but it's quite exciting today to see the size and the amount of conversations we have about domestic violence. This is not saying we've solved the issue, but it's on the agenda. Some of the reports that we've seen come out, Not Now, Not Ever report, in Queensland, and other reports now at the federal level, are really bringing the issue into the open. We are talking about it. Businesses are talking about it. Businesses are asking for people to come and talk to them about domestic violence and talk in their workplaces. So it's an exciting time to be part of this program, because we do know it's on the agenda and we can help make a difference with the work and the programs that we have. What are some of the highlights of the last 20 years? First of all, I'm very proud of the way we've brought communities together, organisations, refuges, business sectors together, using that partnership model to actually come together to address the issue. Another highlight, of course, is our Darkness to Daylight fundraiser led by Rob Reid from Minter Ellison. This started, of course, with Rob running 110 kilometres by himself from Maroochydore down to Brisbane in the dark one night, as part of his being part of the CEO Challenge race. It was an inspirational run on behalf of Rob, and he's turned that now into a major event with over 3,000 people raising over 400,000 for our organisation and the issue of domestic violence. It's very exciting. It's been great to be out in the middle of the night and along the riverbank and through the botanical gardens, wherever that annual event's been held, to see the people involved, to hear the stories, to see why people come out in the middle of the night to run on this very important issue. So a great highlight and a continuing one for us. Another highlight for me was the involvement of Quentin Bryce as the Governor of Queensland at the time, and even continuing in that role when she was Governor-General of Queensland. She agreed to be a patron supporter of our organisation. She did this by coming to lunch at Minter Ellison, and we were able to invite a range of business leaders to come in, sit around the table with the Governor and the Governor-General, and hear about the issue and how important she felt that issue was to our community, and invite them to get involved with us. This issue cuts across all boundaries, and we have given a place and a space for everyone to come together to talk about the issue and be part of a solution which will lead to a world with no violence against women and children. I'm also proud of the amount of support we've had from the political leadership in the Queensland community in particular, from successive ministers, Anna Bligh when she was a minister and later Premier, but a range of ministers, Shannon Fentiman and Grace in particular. Lord Mayor Jim Soorley started it, but his successors continued this, including Campbell Newman. So really, really grateful for the support and the insight that they had in supporting this. But alongside that, there have been many women, many men, many organisations, many community groups which have supported us either financially or in spirit or with advocacy or opening up their doors for us to be part of that conversation. So really grateful to the breadth of people who've come together on this important issue through our program. The issue of domestic violence knows no boundaries, and we've given opportunity for people from all walks of life and all sectors to come together to make a positive difference in the world, to create a world where there's no violence against women and children.